Kevin Gordon here from AutoSavant.com, coming to you from the 2013 Mercedes-Benz SL550. In this segment, I want to talk a little bit about the performance of the SL, because new for this model is a 4.66 liter, really they call it a 4.7 liter twin turbocharged V8 that makes 429 horsepower and 516 foot-pounds of torque. That torque number is ridiculous. I mean, there's just sort of no other way to state it. 516 foot-pounds of torque is, you know, the numbers that they used to get out of the twin turbocharged V12 only a few years ago. And I think in some ways the most amazing part about that performance is during the time that we've had the car, I've actually had a reasonably hard time getting it under 20 miles per gallon, and we really have not been all that nice to it. You know, Mercedes and BMW and a few of the other manufacturers that are going to these twin turbocharged V8s really have done an amazing thing. Now, here's the weird thing about the performance of this car, is it makes so much torque that it really, you know, right from the bottom of the rev range, it's more than happy to pull itself along with authority. But the weird thing about its acceleration is it's not 0 to 60 that's the most impressive part of it. Sure, it's a fast 0 to 60 car. You know, it's a 4.5 or so second 0 to 60 car, depending on how well it launches. But it's really that 60 to 100 that gets to be sort of mind-boggling, because it seems like there is where the transmission sets itself in a really solid ratio and lets the turbos go to full boost and really shoves you with authority. You know, it's one of those cars that seems like it doesn't stop in its force of acceleration as you get it up into the higher speed limits. The Mercedes transmission is the only one available in this car. Is the 7-speed unit that's becoming pretty prevalent across their line. It's got 3 modes: economy, sport, and manual. The manual mode, which also has paddle shifters that come with it, is quick to react from a downshift perspective. You know, rev matches downshifts the way you'd expect. I think the one thing I'd say about it is it's not that quick to react on upshifts. So I've found myself, for most sporty driving scenarios, just leaving it in sport and letting it figure it out on its own, because the engine makes so much torque, and in sport it leaves it close enough to the right ratio most of the time. It's never going to be caught out when you deal with it in the sport mode. The suspension, sort of like the transmission, also has 2 modes. 2 versus 3, of course, sport and comfort. The one thing about the Mercedes systems, to me, seems to be that there isn't that much of a remarkable difference between the different modes in the transmission and the suspension. Sport definitely firms up the suspension, but the Mercedes suspension system is, you know, it's got variable dampers and, you know, this active body control, so that in corners it is perfectly flat, really, whether you have it in sport or comfort. So, you know, I have caught myself, every time you turn on the car, it resets itself back to economy from a transmission mode and comfort from a suspension mode. You know, there's times I'll reach down and press the button to get the transmission into sport, but the suspension, I think, unless you're on a track, really you don't find yourself needing the sport mode for it all that often. So as we, you know, get stuck at a traffic light and put the top up on the SL, we're in economy now, which means that as it sits here with your foot on the brake, the engine's not running. It has automatic start-stop, and I know a lot of people have been sort of quick to give start-stop a bit of sort of trouble during its time, but I have to say that I really don't mind it at all. It's, you know, a pretty intelligent system in the Mercedes, and works as it should. But even even though this isn't the AMG version of this car, if you turn off traction, we'll leave on stability. In sport mode, we'll turn off eco, start up the engine, gets us all the way into first gear. The thing just can shred its tires. And it really does run you along with some pretty serious force. The stability control system, I have read that people have figured out how to turn it off all the way, but I haven't. Basically the way it seems to work is you can press the button quickly or hold it forever, and all it really does is turn off traction control, but stability control's always there. And I think I understand why they do that. If you drive this car in the wet, that 516 foot-pounds of torque can really catch you by surprise if you're not paying attention and you've been silly enough to turn off the electronic manuals. And it will run itself sideways, actually, pretty easily, even with the stability control on. It makes it seem like you get about 10-15 degrees of slip, and then it really starts to try to rein things in. But the motor makes so much power that you can still easily sort of drive through the stability control if you really want to ham-fist it into a corner. The steering rack that's in the SL is one of the variable units. So at slower speeds, it turns the wheels more quickly, and at higher speeds, it turns them more slowly. I've actually enjoyed it. It is a little unnatural in feeling, the steering. It's like the boost on it is just not tuned as well as you might find in other $100,000 sports cars that are out there. But it's nothing really to complain about. It's just something to note that it is not the most of organic systems. We'll lighten up the roof for ourselves here. But the one thing the steering does have is a really aggressive turn-in ratio because of that variable rack. It does move towards corners quickly. And, as I'll talk about in some of the other sections, the other thing that's fun is as you do this in this car, the seats really do wrap you up to hold you tightly if you leave them in their dynamic mode. So come into a corner, set it in, and it will always wiggle its hips. It's always ready to be a bit of a lunatic, this car. So here's the weird thing, in my opinion, of the performance of this car. I've driven the AMG versions of a bunch of the Mercedes now, and I actually think that this engine, transmission, suspension setup fits this car perfectly. The AMG version of it, don't get me wrong, is an animal in a lot of ways, but I don't know if it's a perfect fit for the personality of this car. What this thing is good at is really comfortable, fast, long-distance touring. It's not really meant to be just a tire ripper track car. They make other cars for that. So in some ways, I actually think that if I was buying an SL, this would be my choice of cars. I think it is a complete package. When you compare it to its nearest competitor, the BMW 650 convertible, I suppose it would be the official model for that one, it does have a bit more performance than that car. It makes significantly more torque and a bit more horsepower. It's faster to 60. I've driven one, and the BMW does have very nice driving dynamics. When I talk about this sort of unnatural steering feel of the SL, the BMW might do a bit of a nicer job, but the ultimate limits that are in the SL are definitely higher than in the BMW. it's more aggressive from a turn-in perspective. It has more ultimate grip. I don't know if it's better balanced so much, but it's more fun, I think, from a tail-out perspective because of the fact that those 500 foot-pounds of torque are so quick to make it, throttle steerable in the corners. So again, overall, a really nice performance package, the Mercedes. It doesn't really let you down on a lot of things from you've had a bit of a rough day and you want to shove yourself in the seat perspective. I'm Kevin Gordon from AutoSavant.com. I look forward to talking to you guys soon.